I'd now like to invite up onto stage Jonathan Turpin. Jonathan is the principal of the AIM Group, and he's going to talk about generative AI, threat or friend to marketplaces.
Could I just ask a question of the audience? Could you put your hand up if you've actually played with either ChatGPT or Bard or one of the other tools out there on the market? So pretty much everybody. So thank goodness I didn't put in the learner slides of what it is. Have we ever seen any technology have this kind of impact this fast in terms of engagement? I think the answer is absolutely not. So what I want to do is kind of give a sense of a glimpse of how we think it might impact marketplaces, and very specifically real estate marketplaces today. And as Malcolm says, really, we're not going back very far until the kind of beginnings of this. Yes, there was lots of work going on for many years until ChatGPT hit the headlines, but if you go from the point at which it became a kind of consumer product, it's a very short space of time. We think there are three very important kind of next steps coming reasonably quickly, in some cases, slightly less quickly in one of them. And that's, first of all, the introduction of what are called domain-specific LLMs, so large language models. So this is the move away from simply general AIs like Bard and ChatGPT to AIs that have been specifically trained in an area like real estate or real estate marketplaces to respond very specifically there. And I think probably very few of us have seen or had contact with one of these yet, but they are almost certainly the kind of most powerful early stage product developments within the LLM business. I think general AIs are going to be there for the big guys, but actually the ability to really turn this into monetizable products comes as you begin to focus the technology. Secondly, and we're beginning to see these, and I had my brother over from the States the other day, and he said to me, wow, I love talking to the chatbot at Chase now. Whoever ever liked talking to their chatbot? It's the worst nightmare normally to come up across a chatbot at a bank, but we're beginning to see the crossover of generative AI into the chatbot space. And these chatbots finally becoming things that have a proper, nuanced conversation with you. And I think we're going to see that a lot more, and it's really important in the markets we're in, because an awful lot of what, say, the real estate marketplaces market and real estate agents are about is having a conversation with consumers over time about properties, dealing with their queries, etc. And it's the ability to use that conversational chat, as Malcolm says, to replace many of the agents' kind of face-to-face or phone-based conversations that will really be very valuable here. And then finally, I don't know how big it's been in all parts of the world, but you should go, if you haven't seen it, and see 10 days or so ago Alexa's or Amazon's announcement about Alexa moving to generative AI. Have a look at the videos, have a look at what they're doing to the whole way Alexa talks and the whole way you begin to converse with Alexa. And it's a totally different experience, supposedly coming to certain markets before Christmas this year, and it will begin to give you a sense, I think, of what we might get to in a slightly longer time distance in terms of being able to talk with your computers, potentially talk with your phone, talk with your computer, talk with your TV, and begin to use a different kind of interfacing. And you may say, how is that relevant to real estate? It's very visual content. It really is about the way we can begin to interact and the more natural way that we can begin to query and ask for information from the services we get when we're looking for a home or a rental, etc. And I think, in time we will begin to see, an overarching kind of Alexa-style service that we talk to that is engaged in interacting with the devices we have, so that you can begin to say, Alexa, put that on the television, please, or whatever. So you begin to see an interplay between audio, video in a different way. And I think audio technology is just one of those that it will get to a certain point where its usability becomes better than the complexity of typing in things into search and our ability to work at speed in a kind of textual medium. So those are really important technologies, and that kind of gets us to the kind of first big question I think AI poses for marketplaces. Are we going to get these kind of concierge or agent models that begin to replace marketplaces? And I first did this about 3 months ago. I went into Bard and I put in a query to say, I'd like to find homes within 10 miles of my house with a certain kind of set of criteria. And actually, I did again last night, and this is last night's results, and Bard has actually gone downhill in its ability to provide me with homes over the last period. But you can see the potential for a general AI to begin to answer questions more broadly. In this particular case, I began to worry when it said it was near Streatham Hill on the Northern Line. This is a classic hallucination because Streatham Hill isn't on the tube, let alone on the Northern Line of the tube. And then when I began to click the listings, first one was on Domain. Australia isn't normally within 10 miles of my home, but and then, well, the next one was a rental of a poundland that's gone bust just down the road. So I think the marketplaces don't have to worry at the moment about where general AI is going in this direction. And I come back to domain specific. So I think the main competition we're going to see is people using the domain-specific LLM techniques to produce very targeted real estate-based bots and concierges. But my view is that actually marketplaces remain in the very best position. Providing they take this threat seriously, I think there are a lot of reasons to believe that marketplaces can come out on top in the AI space. And firstly, I mean, as you can see, the problems of dealing with general data on the last slide, you come up with a whole set of stuff that is random, unstructured, the data is not there in a kind of coherent way. We believe one of the main defenses against the kind of attack of AI or AI disruption is going to be not just the scale of data, not just the exclusiveness of data, and there certainly are exclusive areas, and we'll come on to that marketplaces can have, real estate marketplaces in particular, but also the curation of data. This industry does an awful lot to bring together data, monitor it, filter out the poor quality issues, get rid of the fakes, the duplicates, etc. And the curation is almost as important, I think, as actually having the data and the beginning and the ability to structure it in ways that an LLM can use kind of very effectively. And then closely linked to that, I think we've got an even more important in the future kind of issue of trust. So marketplaces can be trusted to have the right quality of content, genuine homes, homes that are still available, etc. In a world where you can produce so much more material, more websites, more businesses, more easily, you have to all the more seek out the kind of beacons of trust in terms of the services you're buying from, etc. So I think that's going to be important. And then, as Malcolm said, we're strong believers that a third leg of defense is kind of transaction. But as Malcolm says, not, that we're going to be buying homes online in the near term, but we're going to see the migration of more of the process of buying the home into the marketplace environment. And versus a concierge system, it's very hard to see smaller players, disruptive players, really investing in a way that gets to the core of the transaction and where the transaction is happening more fundamentally. So there are some very big potential strengths that marketplaces have in defending themselves in this space. And then there are those traditional strengths, particularly brand and direct traffic. And, it is only 40% that's organic. There is a huge amount, particularly on the number ones, of direct traffic nowadays to marketplaces, which is the usual classic defense against disruption of other forms. We've got the complexity of relationships with dealers and agents, and there is a real opportunity to get more information out of agents in more interesting ways that can work effectively for AI. And then we've got the fact that we have very dedicated user experience. This is Hemnet in current current search style, but the fact that we have a real estate customized environment, I think will play out very strongly against anybody trying to come from a kind of more generalist direction. So, not saying that gateways aren't important. I can imagine a conversation in future where I say, Alexa, how's my home search going? And this is a really important point. Malcolm picked it up as well. Generative AI is strongly about personalization. You have a conversation, you build information over time, the AI learns about you. You don't have that in the traditional real estate search experience. So your concierge, your AI environment is going to know a lot more about what your interests have been, how they've developed over time, what you've been looking at, and play back on that personalization. And again, that's a really important strength for the service that is kind of transacting most searches in the market. So I imagine the answer coming back, 5 new ones just in. Do you want me to summarize them, or shall I send them to the TV? So there are going to be still, lots of gateways in this marketplace as we currently have. There's going to be a different kind of complexity to them. And I think we're going to have a whole new raft of regulatory issues. And I was talking to somebody working for a large media business recently, and they said, one of our shock realizations recently is that we didn't even have in our terms and conditions that you can't scrape our news site. So there's a whole kind of set of legal implications that are going to come down the line as well that are going to be important. But these, I think, will get resolved, and we will end up with some interesting new kind of gateway to marketplace type relationships in time. So, second big challenge, hallucination, the fact that these LLMs invent a lot. I think there's a huge amount, absolutely huge amount of work going on around hallucination at the moment. Lots of different approaches to how to crack the problems, AIs checking the AIs, and all sorts of other kind of clever algorithmic approaches to improve what's happening. It feels to me that it's a problem that will get cracked at least to the level of accuracy needed for most purposes. And I think in real estate, there's going to be certain areas where you've got to be quite careful about. So things like producing particulars, you don't want to be going straight live from an LLM. These are things that are going to be needing human intervention, human checks to make sure that what's produced is accurate. And then there are certain things, I think search, at the end of the day, it can have a certain inaccurate tolerance in it. Users will put up with it. We've done that for years with Google, not quite delivering the ideal kind of set of results for us. So I think hallucination is a problem. You've got to be mindful of it, but I think it's going to be one that reduces reasonably rapidly in time as the technology develops. So let's look at real estate, and let's imagine a natural language query. And you're going to say to me, nobody's ever going to put in a query like that, and you're absolutely right. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But just hang with me for the moment and have a look at this kind of particular query that's possible in a natural language search that can't be achieved in a structured search as currently. So in here, we've got a mix of data. So we've got general third-party data that we can bring into the search to really enhance the way it works. We've got unstructured agent data. So there's a lot of data that actually exists in agent systems. We don't currently structure. We can't use in a very useful way in a structured search environment, but it suddenly becomes much more useful. And there are some things like Shady Garden that, well, it might not be in the particulars, but the photograph may make it evident that that's what you've got. So I think in time we're going to get quite a lot of interesting kind of possibilities of what we do with photographic data and so on. We've then got some rich specialist data. Only one example in here, priced low for the area. A lot of marketplaces will have valuation databases, automated valuation businesses, etc., which is the kind of most obvious type of unique data that is not going to be available to others generally in the market easily to compete. And then we've got a whole raft of data that really is very unique to marketplaces. So we've got the blue, we've got here site behavioral data. So we've got the ability potentially to bring out the workings of the site, the history of people's usage, the homes they've seen before, etc., to really further personalize and enhance the experience. And again, this is data that's quite hard to get into use. It can be used, currently in AI, with AI to put up recommendations, etc. But it's not data that we've been able to get into a kind of search-based approach to date. So you've got this whole set of data that really allows you, if you pull it together well, to begin to have a strong competitive advantage in the market. Malcolm's point about monetization is really super important, I think. And I think it's something that's only beginning to kind of sink in. Because the natural, inevitable path, I think, for natural language search is that searches become consumer-focused experiences. You know, the answers have to be the things that match the search in a much more detailed way than they do in a traditional kind of structured search. So, you know, your idea of search orders being paid for, top results being paid for, those things are going to have are going to be much more challenging to implement in an AI-based environment. And I think one thing that's going to be very important early on is to begin to kind of figure out how you monetize the listings business in an effective way without some of those value-added service and other structures that exist in the kind of current marketplace world. Sorry, I've got a clicker problem. Pictures. We have this whole set of rich content. LLMs are not just good at words. They're increasingly good at audio. They're increasingly good at pictures. They're increasingly good at understanding video. And my suspicion is that we're going to find some really interesting things coming out of the use of pictures. There are already generative AI services that use the pictures of a house to help generate the particulars for the house. So we're already beginning to see that. I think we'll get much more interesting ways of guiding information that can come out of pictures that just isn't really there in the kind of textual environment. It'll be longer term to get to that, but I think there's a real rich source of additional kind of data and information there. So to come back to the question of the long query. I mean, nobody queries like that. What's very clear is that generative AI is about having a conversation. If you look at any of the guides about prompting AI, to get really good answers, you should prompt the AI to ask you questions, etc. And so what we see is a world where this is going to become very conversational, very personalized, and it will be about the AI being able to really entice out of the home seeker exactly what it is they're looking for, which is something we just don't have in the existing kind of structured world. And I think, you know, most of us are really bad at searching. This is something to really enhance that consumer experience. A little digression. I want to play you a clip here. This is not the real estate space. This is a job space. I'd like to suggest this is kind of maybe a technique to avoid. I want to find a new job. Can you help me? I'm telling the AI some interesting things about me. The AI just says, of course, I'd be happy to help. And then it straight away asks me to give it the 4 things that go into a structured search. This does not seem to me the most attractive way to generate a kind of an AI-based search experience. But I think it does have some kind of really important kind of messages behind it, because we're still going to have a huge mass of structured data behind the AI-based search that we have. And I think how you communicate and how you cross-link to that data is clearly going to be fairly crucial. But secondly, it brings home the fact that even if you ignore, you know, the beauty of actually being able to search in a fundamentally different way, even if you wrap this technology around a classic structured search and push your questions in that direction, the natural language search, as Malcolm indicated, still makes it much easier to kind of get to the position of putting in your search queries, etc. So I think that there's a huge amount, even without thinking about the different nature of the search, that just moving to natural language brings to what you do. For those of you who are kind of more interested in broader marketplaces, we have a kind of belief that different kinds of marketplaces are going to be affected in quite different ways. Those that have more kind of commodity-type products, like the automotive space, we believe will be affected, but will be least effective in terms of the impacts of generative AI. And as you move up the scale towards more personalized kind of goods, you'll begin to get greater value out of generative AI. If we look at that kind of scale, as you move beyond the commodities, we think homes is at the more significantly impacted level of the scale, and that probably amongst the core classifieds, only recruitment services are going to be more impacted by generative AI. So I think this is a particularly important space for the marketplaces, for the real estate marketplaces audience. So, finished with search for the moment. What else is generative AI about at real estate marketplaces? Slight digression. It's one of my favorite uses of AI, and I did check. It's not just robots. There's lots of AI going on in the background. This is the Tipsy Robot Bar in Vegas, and it has 2 robots that will serve you your drinks. Actually, it has 2 robots and 8 humans, so it takes an awful lot of humans to make sure that the robots are doing their job effectively. And I think the next big message is to flip that around, and the word that we're hearing all over at the moment is co-piloting. So the other big aspect, and I think we'll see this come into play generally much faster than we will search changes through generative AI, is co-piloting. And we have, within the real estate environment, not just sales as here, but rentals as well, we have an environment where there is a huge amount of paperwork, a huge amount of preparation of material, a huge amount of conversation around queries, customer queries about properties, etc. There's a whole kind of process of really understanding the properties in kind of more detail. And I think this is a space that we're going to see a lot of development fairly rapidly. It started already clearly in preparation of listings, preparation of home particulars, but I think we'll also see it moving much more into the customer service interface. And I think there's a huge opportunity for marketplaces to begin to help estate agents, real estate agents, by reducing their workload, putting more of that into the AI domain, and actually locking in those agents through new kind of tools that will help not just in relation to what they're doing with the marketplaces, but in terms of their broader kind of operations. So this is an area I think is really very important to kind of look at and can give some pretty fast rather than kind of more mid to long-term wins. And of course, there is just the general impact of AI within kind of overall operational environments. Prosus, owner of OLX and other marketplaces across their whole business, not just the marketplace businesses, has recently announced that it's releasing a swathe of AI-based tools for all its staff to use in order to make their worlds more efficient. And I think we've probably got quite a lot of functions that can benefit just internally within marketplaces from generative AI. So, where does this leave us in terms of kind of winners and losers? I think marketplaces, providing they react, providing they pilot, providing they learn, are going to be the winners still in this environment. But I think within marketplaces, we're going to see a strong advantage come out of generative AI, again for the number ones over the number twos and the number threes. This is going to need some serious investment. Usually it's the number ones that have more extensive, better scaled data. It's not always true. We've got the real strength of brand and the direct traffic, as Malcolm said, really important given likely changes in the SEO and SEM environment. And we've got the ability to leverage gateways. It's more likely that the big players will be able to leverage those relationships effectively. And then when we get to the whole aspect of personalization and services for both clients and users, personalization and the ability to produce richer services more embedded in the real estate agent's daily working life are both things that I think help lock in both agents and health seekers kind of much more strongly. Kind of almost at the end, who's doing what? There's still relatively little that's visible. There's lots going on behind the scenes. but you can see from the kind of things that are out there, at the top we've got playing around, beginning to understand, piloting small things on search. At the bottom we've got lots of businesses, particularly businesses that are separate from the marketplace space but work with agents, beginning to do a lot about property descriptions, etc., including RESTB.ai, actually generating descriptions out of photos and so on. And then we've got people like REA, and there's quite a lot of this, just playing with small features, beginning to understand how they can use the technology in a contained way, get that out, make it work. So, they're using it, for example, to generate those key feature labels that Malcolm mentioned on properties that illustrate the best things. So, key takeaways. I think it's really crucial that marketplaces are engaged in this early, that they pilot, they build skills. It's not an immediate monetization thing, but it's critical that you get to understand this medium and how you use it, and particularly how it might impact search. I think chatbots and generative AI-based chatbots are going to be increasingly important, so beginning to understand how you can use those to improve the whole relationship between home seekers and agents and the marketplace. I think it's really important to track the development of what's happening with the gateways, the big players and the concierges and so on, and make sure that you're responding to those effectively. And then, fundamentally for all marketplaces, to really figure out how you make data work for you and what data there is that you don't have that in this environment becomes much more attractive, and what elements of that you can close off and make exclusive to you. And where you're not making it exclusive, how do you really curate it effectively? And how do you create your own unique data assets from the information you hold, both current and historic? And then finally, I think, AI-based tools for recruiters, obviously forgot to change that one from agents and dealers, but for recruiters, not for recruiters, for agents, I think is an absolute opportunity to really strengthen and embed and simplify relationships. So that's me. Your turn.
Thank you for that. Can we bring up the questions, thanks? Because there are a bunch of questions out there. We're going to start from the top because you guys can vote with your thumbs up. It pushes it towards the top, nice and easy for me. Okay? Won't the user experience be awful if you have this long format discussion with AI and there are no properties that fit the answer or fit what you're really asking for?
I think the experience is awful already if there are no properties that meet your criteria. But the job of a good conversational AI should be to find you the things that you're not thinking about that are equivalent and parallel, that others are interested in. And that degree of personalization, I think, makes it actually potentially a much better experience than with the current kind of search paradigm, because you really can, draw in that very personalized view of the world.
Okay, so then there was another question. Do you think portals will build domain-specific large language models themselves, or there'll be a external provider?
So I think that one's kind of difficult to see at the moment. There is clearly a democratization of LLMs going on, Facebook being in the lead in terms of open sourcing its LLM. There are clearly some interesting reasons for wanting to own your own technology, as there always are potentially. But I think we're going to have a great skills shortage as well. So it may well be that in the near term, domain-specific LLMs are something that are partnered in terms of developing them in order to kind of make that work with the right availability of resources, etc., and the levels of expertise you need. And also, I think, there's a big problem here. You've got lots of technologies coming out. We're going to see technology after technology after technology. So you've got a question of, am I backing the right horse? Do you want to go big on something straight away? Or are you going to work with a partner, on a contained way, contained cost basis, and then figure out over time where the real end destination is?
Okay. On that point, if you think about these large language models, there's sort of a generic model just covers everything. There's then real estate specific type models, and then there's what's unique to Rightmove. Okay,
Yeah.
and there's sort of this sort of 3 levels. Is it a case that there'll be everyone takes the Facebook one, whatever, at the top, and then they then progressively add more focused data as they go down?
I kind of would, I mean, I suppose I see it more, so LLMs, domain-specific ones, have basically core generic content. They have to have that in order to understand how to chat. So I see it as really, probably the deeper level, the deepest level you have, grafting on top of that kind of basic core model. Does that answer the question? I'm not quite sure
Yeah, that's close enough. That's close enough. Because at the end of the day, there's a couple of questions here which are all around about regulation.
Yep.
Is important, and like GDPR, etc., because we're here in Europe.
Yep.
At the core of it, these AI models, build themselves based on knowing a lot about you.
Yep.
Problem is, knowing a lot about you in some countries is easy, no one cares. In other countries, you've got the European regulations, and they'll go, no, you can't have that. How do you see that playing out?
Well, I'm a great believer that the data protection models will soften to accommodate these kind of models. And I think that'll happen in part because in the territories where the regulations are lighter, there will be more significant developments, and regulators will begin to see that actually the potential of the technology without some of the rules that exist is actually much greater. So, Europe will never soften quickly on its rules. And I think also, we're going to have to get smarter about how we collect those permissions. But, you can imagine a conversation with an AI that says, Jonathan, are you okay if I remember this information you just shared with me so that next time you ask, I've got your... And if we begin to get permissive in that way, you can see, a lot of those problems kind of going away. So I think we will find solutions to that, and I think the regulators will find...
It's no different calling the call centres at the moment as saying, this call is being monitored. If you have a problem, press 1.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And that'll just play itself out in this market.
Yeah, but I think it's also, you can make it very permissive, because I think most people... Actually, they want the convenience.
Of course.
And if they know it's contained...
I think there's a small group of people who care a lot about the problem and a very large group of people who wish the problem wasn't there.
Yeah.
Okay, so one last question. As you mentioned, the implementation of generative AI will require substantial investment. Do you believe that the platforms will have to depend on service providers, sort of plug-and-play options, or will they build the features themselves, or will it be a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both. I think it depends on your scale, and I think there's so much investment going into making this technology simpler to use. A year and a half ago, you had to have hundreds of millions to have an LLM. Now you can use Facebook's under license free of charge and develop from it. So I think we're going to see technologies that become internally manageable, certainly for the larger players, and I think we'll also see quite a lot of interesting external kind of support on these. But I think it's a market where potentially there are lots of different opportunities, so there's less risk of being stuck into a provider maybe than in some other spaces, depending on how you use the technology.
Fantastic. Jonathan, thank you very much for talking about generative AI. Very interesting. Thank you.